City Council on March 8th, 2022. And a couple of things, I'd like to excuse Eric, he's out of town. And we're going to try to hurry fast to get to the office meetings for those. I will make an apology, bad planning, should have caught that before we got into this too far. So let's go with,
Oh, your mic.
sorry.
You know, Steve, if we canceled city council for the caucus meetings, we wouldn't have any in March. And we wouldn't have any council meetings in March.
Right.
Because the Democrats are in 2 weeks, Tuesday, so.
So we'll speed through it.
So 2 times we speed through it.
Let's see, was Jake coming? Ty?
Nope, I was just gonna introduce him as all. Just,
Oh, he's not coming?
mm-mm.
Oh, okay.
We met him briefly yesterday.
Yeah, I told him, if you're gonna be there, just introduce yourself. Sorry, I'm not there.
So let's move to number 1 item, Still Solar 1B project. I talked to Ty on it, but he's got a lot more in his head than I learned from talking to him.
Yeah, so this is just a solar project. UAMPS has projects coming every once in a while, and this is an add-on to a current project that's actually going well. So I signed up to take 50 kilowatts. So very small amount to be part of the solar project. The basic premise is just so we can say that we have solar as a resource. Just thought it was a good idea. Committing very much. We still have other projects, waiting to see how the nuclear plant, pans out. We've also signed up for a carbon recapture project on one of the coal plants. We're still exploring other opportunities, but the issue with solar is it's cheap power for a couple of hours a day. And so while we're involved in the project and it will get like a 32-cent rate, it's at the exact same time that the market is likely going to be pretty much the same market rate because there's a lot of solar coming online on the system. And it's not the time of day that we actually need very much power. So that's all that is I just put us in for 50 kilowatts if you concur. If not, we don't sign the agreement, we get kicked out of the project.
Take it or?
You have to take or pay.
Take or pay.
Yeah, but it's at 30, the pricing, it's probably not gonna matter if we take it or put it back on the market. Yeah, because that's like I said, there's been some other ones, but I didn't like the structure of the solar farm or where it was located or who the agreement was with. So there was some on, like reservation land that it's like, man, that's gonna be really complicated on negotiation. There was another one where they're adding solar at a existing coal plant that came with a bunch of issues with decommissioning the coal plant that could affect, how well the solar plant takes off. But this one was a part B or an add-on to an existing one that seems like it's going.
Where is
So-
that solar farm?
Yeah, it's Box Elder County. Yeah, so it's relatively close, which also means our transmission charges are less, right? If we bought 50 kilowatts in a plant in New Mexico, the transmission charges on the power is probably. Yeah. So anyway, as all those things lined up, I just put in on that. They asked us, do we want more than that? And I said, I think that we're good for now. There's a lot of projects, not a lot, but there's been several projects. And what happens is as they come online, because we're all just little participants in a larger project as UAMPS members, it becomes part of the firm project, which we're already a part of. I can't remember why the acronym for firm, but that project interacts with the pool project, which means any overages first go to other UAMPS members where we buy and sell power from each other before it goes out to market. So it's like a little safety net where, you know, if there's overruns, we're short, somebody else is long, then that gets shared between the members before we're just subjected 100% to the market. So that's how that works, but that's why it's not we're not putting a bunch of capital costs and all of that into it. You know, our percentage is pretty low, but
Ty, is this project already done? Is it completed?
no. Phase one is, I can't remember when Steel B comes online, but it's 2023 or 4, I think.
Okay, so are they?
Yeah,
installing it
they're
right
working
now?
on it, yeah.
And it looks like UAMS is taking all of part B, it
Mhm.
appears.
Mhm.
Just looking through the contract, if somebody defaults, you know, and there's City of St. George, pretty good, 61%. We have an opportunity to share the rest of that with all of us. But then that sharing, we can elect to either take it or not. But if we elect not to, and there isn't enough of that default distributed amongst everybody, we're forced to take it up to a 25% maximum. But then there's a part at the very end that says any costs incurred solely to this transaction, including but not limited to PPA costs, transmission costs, et cetera, will be the responsibility of purchasers invoiced to the UAMPS power bill.
Mhm.
Is that purchasers meaning the entire UAMPS program or just these?
Just those entities at that rate. So our percentage of the overall cost. So
I mean, the potential's there then that if, let's say out of 3, 6, 7, 8 entities, 7 of them defaulted, we'd have the whole thing?
up to 25%
More.
more, yeah.
What is UAMPS? How do they cover the rest? Say if everybody else defaulted?
So they also open it back up and say, okay, so if 3 of them are out, the rest of the members also have a chance to up their subscription,
Right.
right? So then they balance that out and
But
then,
suppose no one elects to do it, then they assign that evidently to us.
well, but if, what do you mean by default too? Maybe we should say that,
Default,
like they're not
if anyone-
taking that?
No, yeah,
because-
if any one of these, the contract calls it defaults, if any one of these, I guess, can't pay it or can't participate,
Well,
can't continue.
okay, so they can't exit the project. If they can't continue and other people don't take it, they actually all get billed on their own UAMPS power bill. They don't get to just walk away from it.
Take or pay.
Right, but it's forced. I mean, that bill is forced onto you. In other words, could we be paying for stuff that we didn't really want?
Not really, because we're just part of the project and it just changes the price of power. So for example, we're part of the wind farm project in Idaho,
Mhm.
right? There's a certain number of members in there and then inevitably they're like, hey, one blade went bad and you have to replace all 3. You can't just replace one. Here's the X amount of cost. This is how this project this year was in deficit by X amount of dollars. That just gets distributed back to each person and then the actual performance or the rate gets adjusted accordingly to absorb those capital costs. So we could be subjected to capital costs like, hey, we got a whole bank of solar panels, right? That something went
Yeah.
haywire on us, but it gets put back in and then leveraged over time through rates. So we never actually out of pocket. It's more viewed as how well is that project performing? And then you get your bill adjusted accordingly. But as far as risk or exposure, it's,
Yeah, so
see that being an
the
issue.
50 kilowatts, that's just getting your foot in the door. Why wouldn't we take more?
just because we don't need the power at that time of day. And so we would be,
Somebody like St. George must need it, I guess, to
so there's
take
some.
61% of them.
Yeah, well, so like Lehigh, there's some of them that are taking every kilowatt that they can get in any project. They don't even care what
Because
time of day it is, because right now they're running generators,
Okay.
their own generators at a way higher cost just to balance their load. Because once you're subjected to the market, like, I don't care what,
It gets
what time of day it is, right? And so, and we've experienced that. Last year, we had some pretty terrible months ours are incrementally getting, the cost of power is just going up. But in these high growth areas, they're gonna, buy whatever
Yeah.
they can. And so what happens though is when we all put in, we all have a chance to put in. And UAMPS has a process where we put a notice and then we put how much we want. They actually came back and said, do you want any more than this? And I declined, which meant it went to, like, once it's fully subscribed on the purchase agreement, they check with everybody just to make sure also that it's not just one entity saying, I want 100% of that project. Because there's other entities that would say,
That's a good point.
hey, let's just get 100% of
Yeah, maybe
every single one of them, and then we don't even have a chance, because, but they have a pretty good process of,
allocating.
yep. So everyone says who's in it first, then of who's in, how much do you need? And then they look at how much how much was available, and then they start cutting everybody off incrementally. Yep. And if there wasn't enough, they would come back and say, hey, we need, we're 5,000 short. Anybody else need them, or want it?
So you'll be looking at other solar projects as they,
I look at all of them, but this is just the only one that's really made
some sense for us.
some sense. It's nearby. It's already kind of phase 2, so kind of a proven,
Phase 1 is up and running.
close. They're working on it, but it's
Going ahead.
headed,
without
yeah.
Overruns. and things
Yeah,
like
so
that.
it isn't held up by permitting and some other weird arrangement. You know what I mean? Where
Yeah,
some of them other, it's like, I don't know if they're ever gonna
Box
actually.
Elder gave their permission back in the council of 2019, so it's had some time to get going.
Yeah.
So get some steam build up.
Yeah, and I haven't been tracking one that close. I just know that it's been working out.
Yeah, this one has a smaller risk to us than.
Yeah. Yeah, and I do, just on the premise, I do think it's valuable to have, we already have wind, have solar, hydro. Just, the other thing at the very minimum is we'll get REC credit, so it's, something that you can sell to a company if someone wants to be carbon zero or, net zero emissions as a company. Anybody on our system, we can say, well, we can sell you some credits, which are renewable energy credits.
Carbon credits.
Yep.
So I was gonna say,
Probably not gonna get that many kilowatts, but
I wouldn't think city of St. George, Washington City really care what time of day it is. I mean, I imagine
They can
down
use
there,
it.
their air conditioners are going probably all night long, so. They probably really don't care about what time of day.
Where they're gonna need power to run air conditioners for sure.
everyone's trying to match their load, right, and find resources at those opportune times. But if you're subject to the open market, it's just been so crazy. It's like what happened in Texas. Everyone's power just
Yeah. Well, they were limited with their.
went up and just, but it impacted the entire market. So it's,
I guess that's when I looked at it, is, are we taking enough? But if we don't need any more,
yeah, because it really won't do anything at that time of day. The other thing I think we want to do is keep working on it. We're working on a rate study right now. We want to really evaluate how we're approaching rooftop solar behind our own meter. We haven't really gotten behind that in the past, but if we can adjust and it won't be disruptive to our own system, then we need to, that time of day, right, is just the thing until people get batteries figured out and other storage things. So that's kind of why we just kind of, or my recommendation is just to get started and then keep looking at other options as they come open.
Price is $31 per megawatt hour, but that changes though, doesn't it? I mean, that can't stay the same.
Yep, that's totally like what you said. If there's extra capital costs or operational costs, something goes south, those, and the actual performance,
I think it's important to know the players, the companies that are doing this and putting it together so that we can manage or minimize those risks that there are overruns and so forth. But looking out there, the steel is owned by steel, I think, is because of Nucor Steel. They've also got another project that, can't remember the name of the company that is doing it. But they call it, the other one Rocket, and that's up by Thiokol. Yeah, Inyo Energy, I think it says it's the name. And they've been doing it for a while. It sounds like they know a little bit about, they've got, in fact, they were the ones that started that did the wind farm down at Spanish Fort King. I think that was one of their first projects was down there. Then they've got wind up in Wyoming, and it sounds like maybe this solar, they're probably getting into it more recently than before. Most of what they were doing before looked like it was wind, but
A lot of wind in Wyoming.
yeah.
There is a lot of wind in it. But
A natural resource.
yeah, and not necessarily this project, but there's a carbon recapture project where they just capture the carbon from a coal fire plant, put it in the ground somehow, and then produce energy off of it. And I don't totally understand it, but it has a lot. Yeah, no. Anyway, it's pretty interesting and just a great like second use, but it still has a lot of development challenges with that if it's actually gonna work or not. So we put in an interest. We haven't signed up for any of that until we see if it's actually gonna pay off, but yeah.
Somebody like St. George, this wouldn't be the only project they're subscribed to, right?
Oh, they have several. Yeah, plus they do their own generation.
Yeah, that's what I was wondering. Hot enough down there.
And they have their own transmission. So they have their own, from their generation to their city, they have their own transmission line that's, they help other entities with through that system. So it's big deal, but
Good. Thank you. That's all the questions I had.
yeah, no, that's good. And then at the League Cities and Towns, they do have a workshop for UAMP. So a toolkit workshop. So, and you went to the one conference, right? So if any of you were personally interested in these, you're welcome to come to the meetings and
That was at noon on Wednesday.
yeah,
Yes.
on Wednesday when we
Couple
get done.
of the- I've been to a couple where they talked a lot about the new scale project. I think I've been to a couple of those.
Yep. And there's also an opportunity to go to Corvallis and look at the new scale facilities and at the university where they have a mock-up of what the small.
This is down there at the conference.
Not at the conference, it's just another opportunity, right? So any council members that want to get is the Corvallis
When's that coming up?
in May.
I can send, I have a copy of the agenda. so-
Oregon, yeah.
It's the ducks, right?
Mhm. Yeah, and so if you're interested, I've been up there, they show the whole, how they do all the modeling. They have a little replica or a small reactor, what it's designed, mock up or whatever of the design, and talk about all the permitting that they've been through and all of that. So it's kind of cool just to see what's on New Scale side on that development of the project, but
Where's it at?
in Corvallis, Oregon.
Get you some duck gear while you're there.
Yeah, so UAMPS has an opportunity, they schedule a bus, right? So you just get your flight, they book your flight, you go there, they take you from the airport down to the facility, have your rooms, and then they have a tour, so they take you over to the facility and then take you to a couple of locations and just get a pretty big update and chance to ask a lot of questions. So
Will you go to it?
I've been before, yeah. I won't go to this one unless somebody wants me to go with them.
You go to that Wednesday meeting down there?
Probably not.
Yeah, I'll be
Or-
probably traveling down. I'm taking Mary, so I don't know that we'd be there in time.
Are you going Wednesday morning?
That's when you'd have to go to be there at noon.
Yeah, to be there by noon. I'll already be down there, but I probably won't go to the toolkit. That's for elected officials unless, if one of you are attending and would like me to be there so we can talk about, I can make arrangements to be there, but I hadn't planned on it, so. I mean, it's
They're gonna be discussing new scale, do you think, quite a bit at that meeting?
Yeah, that's a hot topic always, right? That's the big
Oh, for sure.
UAMPS project and it's, has its issues, but more and more as disruptive as everything else gets, it still seems like the most viable option at this point.
Any more discussion? Okay, let's move to item 2, and Lance is here to bring us up to date on this bid award on Commercial Street.
Last week, we received 4 bids for commercial street realignment project. 4 good bids and companies. We Wardell Brothers of Morgan here was the low bid of $519,613. They were underneath the engineer's estimate. We feel like we got good pricing and are recommending move forward with them.
Any kind of a drawing or a rendering of what that project's gonna look like?
I'm interested too.
Curious to see.
Probably just,
Or something, Lance?
this is the one where we have on west side. Anyway, from
East
One-
side of the river, west side railroad tracks.
Maybe that's right.
Oh, I was doing north and south with the river, so so that would make,
I don't know what the hell street it's called.
Yeah.
South.
anyway, on, okay, I'll rephrase that. On this side of State Street, no, this is the commercial realignment, right? This is the river. So it also includes a trails grant that we applied for. So there won't be any sidewalk, but there will be a trails grant. And the trail right now is being designed to go behind, I'll just say behind the bus garage.
Yes, that's where,
It's very narrow back there, but it looks
that is
like,
existing, yes.
uh,
And right here.
anyway, and then it'll outlet onto
Yeah,
the
this will be about
commercial street
5
property.
feet higher than existing grade,
fairground, yeah.
which that's what. it
Just up to
was
the city
allowed
boundary.
us to
I hadn't realized
flatten
that the
bridge
whole
out
bus
because we
garage is in
couldn't
the city.
Get enough elevation here.
The
This
whole bus
allows us
garage
to
is in the
flatten
city
that
limits.
bridge out.
Oh, it is right now?
Must be the county line right there.
So we're
It's on
taking it up
top
to
of
the
a
city line, but that's, before I was taking it up to the bus
line,
garage and then
high-pressure
realized, hey, our
gas
city
line and
boundaries,
fiber optic lines
other side of the
none of
bus
which we
garage, so
can
we'll
go
go behind
build.
the,
up 7 feet
behind the
on
gas,
top of.
right along the river, so that'll be cool.
That little parking spot.
Yes, all
beside the
new.
bus garage is city also. or would that
Uh,
be in between the bus and.
I
the
think that's county.
20, 10, 50.
About the boundary, I think is, yeah, the boundary. I think that's county.
50, 70, 8.
Anyway, so we applied for
It's like
the sidewalk
100
portion.
feet,
Be trail.
500 feet, yeah.
There's a water line across the river there.
So it's gonna come up Commercial Street.
What?
So the water line's already through Commercial Street, but it's,
Right, but I was thinking that coming down Young Street.
I
there,
could look
Jenkins
at,
already developed
I could figure that up.
all
and
that property there.
they'll have to bring the
I could
water.
get that
yeah,
to
they'll
you.
have to bring the water line.
Thanks, Lance.
Well, it comes across 100 south, or no, what is that, or where you live, Dave? What's 100? 100
south.
south comes across the field and ties in to the one on Young Street, but from where
Yeah,
about from
this is
Young
where it's
Street
going to be.
down and
Cross
across.
garage
tie
is
into
right here.
Commercial Street.
Yeah, so there won't be any
Last
utilities on the
house
bridge.
Commercial Street is right
Because on the
here.
other side, the water line goes all the way down Commercial
Originally,
Street.
this is on railroad property and we couldn't bring this up enough.
Jeff, this would be one that you don't vote on?
We ended up this side of the bridge in order, because we couldn't raise this up. Because it's
him.
on top of crude lines, fiber optic
You're one
line,
of the
and high pressure
bidders.
gas line. and railroad
So you're
problem.
one of the bidders, right?
So over
Yeah.
here,
Well.
this was gonna be almost 15 feet tall.
No.
Oh,
we
there's
were
got
able, but by moving this, we were able to flatten this bridge out. We raised this up on our own
Maybe a
property.
question for Gary, is that a?
And this load, instead of being 15 feet tall, it's like 9 feet tall now in front of the Jenkins property. No, see, our high point was originally on this side of the bridge because we couldn't come up here. So
Yeah.
Gotcha.
anyways.
So they're gonna move that road out.
Yeah, it'll just be moved out.
Okay.
Might violate a company standard if he votes for the other guys.
You may get fired. I'd like to take a quick peek, sure.
What does it cost?
About what you'd expect.
That was a joke.
That's good.
Okay,
Couple of questions on numbers, Steve, if I could. So the Wardell brothers, I guess there's a little bit of concern that I would have, Ty and Lance, on the bid amounts. I mean, the difference between the highest bid and the lowest bid was 34%. And more than that, if you average all of the bids, including the engineer's estimate, Wardell's are 26%. That's 1/4% less than everybody else. My question is, can they do the job for that much less? Concern.
So
Go ahead.
I didn't look at the numbers real close, but one of the things is because of the material required to elevate the road. Sourcing the material locally might be one of the factors. I don't know what else. I didn't,
Look at the
yeah,
line
the
items.
big difference, but based on other work that's been done, I didn't have any concern that they couldn't complete the
Okay.
project as bid.
They've done work for us in the past.
Yeah, and Matt with Jones and Associates, they had called him and talked about it with him and a couple days before the bid, and I think they had even said, we think your engineer's estimate's a little high. We're under it and we're comfortable or whatever, anyways, and they talked about it. Matt's gone over everything. It's when you go through line by line and look at all the different items, it's interesting to see how one company, a certain item is so low versus another company, the same thing is so high.
Yeah.
And I mean, material sources are a big part of it. And I think in construction, my experience, a project like this, that they can get going on early before maybe their big job starts. This gets their guys up and going and gets some work going. And, if this had bid in July, I don't suspect any of the prices would have been what they are now because everybody's already busy.
Speaking of line item, here's a good example at number 6, Clear and Grub. I mean, Wardell's is 4,800. Meekums is 44,000. I mean, that's only 10% of what the highest bidder was. That's a big difference. It has to create a question mark as to what's going on. Do we know what we're doing? Look at Jeff because he's in the business, but
Yeah. Well, a lot of that has to do with, you get a local company with a gravel pit that they can maybe even recycle the old asphalt.
Mhm.
One company may be having to haul the asphalt to that company and pay to dispose of it. Where they're hauling it down there, they're gonna maybe recycle the concrete and asphalt off a project and they're gonna sell it. And that can affect their pricing
Gotcha.
majorly, and Meekums probably they don't have a place. They would have to pay to dispose of any material they hauled off, where other
Somebody else
companies
might.
may have a place that they can reuse it or whatever. And that can play a big effect into a lot of these items.
Maybe Jeff, this one's directed to you. What does mobilization mean? That was number one on the,
Just your cost of mobbing, your bond cost of
oh, okay, soft
within
costs.
there
maybe.
and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Insurance. It's usually stuck up in that number.
All right. Okay, well, that's all the questions I had.
Any other comments?
Can I run real quickly, run through this one more time for me, how we're financing this project? You mentioned it, I think.
Creatively.
Right?
Next several years budget.
Yeah, so there's a couple things that play. One is we're gonna request some corridor preservation money, right, on the purchase of the school property, and that's not included in this, but then the remaining amount, we'll be able to ask for half of whatever's remaining for maintenance, which is included. We're gonna use part of this year's BNC or road BNC and 0.25%. And then some of this will get subsidized a little bit by the school district because they're gonna pay the sewer line cost. So they'll take, a little bit out of it and still to bring the sewer line up to the bus garage. And then we're gonna pay out of the capital improvement fund, money we had set aside for the bridge. So this is technically part of the bridge project. Money set aside, at least our portion of that. So we're just gonna take from that this year. And because we don't have any big bridge payments to make until next year when the bridge actually happens, and we'll see how much of that we can pay back before the bridge starts. So really all it does is push a little bit more of the shortfall onto the bridge project.
So the capital improvement fund, we hope that we can reload that by the time the bridge project comes in.
Yeah, so we're gonna get as much help as we can with the other things. We're postponing the sidewalk because we're applying for a grant for that. And then, there's other corridor preservation funds. We may be able to get, 200,000 from that, from the,
10%, $10 you pay every time you register a vehicle.
yeah, in the county every,
Corridor Preservation Fund. And it runs through COG.
so. So anyway, between the COG, the portion that the school district's gonna contribute for the,
BNC, 0.25%.
yep, whatever we can out of this year's current budgets, because the other road project that we have is the 100 south, 100 north project, which we just got $100,000 grant for this side, and we have 98,000 for the other side. And then the school's gonna contribute 50,000 for the parent drop off. So we'll have a little bit of this year's current money to put towards that project. So that's like maybe 4 different sources of funding. So when I say creatively, it's just a mix of anything we can do.
My household finances, pretty much,
Yeah. But anyway, that's the plan, is to use the least amount out of capital improvement as we can, but we do have the money set aside. And this is technically just to make the bridge project possible.
So we'll
So,
still be able to continue to do what we wanted to do as far as with our BNC road funds and our 0.25%, other than this project, we'll still be able to
yep,
accomplish those things.
Regular maintenance.
we haven't stopped regular maintenance. We're still
Yeah.
doing what we can.
And one thing to keep in mind that even if we had left Commercial Street as is and fought with the railroad and got that work through, a lot of the money for the paving on this, we'd have been raising Commercial Street anyways some. You start looking at the amount of fill that would have been trucked in for this, it would have been far higher had we left it as it was and been building up another 8 or 9 feet in front of the Jenkins home. So I don't have any hard numbers, but I would dare say we're saving far more than we're spending by doing this, even though maybe we'd be kicking it down the road a year and doing it as part of the bridge project. That not to mention there's big savings on us just being able to go in and design it on our own and cut the federal stuff and the UDOT requirements out, and we can just build our own road. And so there's savings there as well.
Getting around that Buy America Act too, if UDOT would have been involved in it.
Mhm.
through all
Well,
the-
yeah, well, just even getting it done in the
That's a
current
good
year it's a Christmas miracle.
Challenge.
Sounds like one of those projects, it's good, just get it done and get it behind you and move on, huh?
Good, got a good price.
Yeah, and that's been also just the upside this year on some of our bidding with the way everything else has gone. It's as good or better pricing than we would have got last year on some of our things. So that's surprising on roads.
Yeah, and it's helpful. We originally, Matt was gonna have this ready to go in April and bid, and that one Friday, I was sitting at home and we were talking, he had called me about something else and we got talking about it. I says, Matt, is there any way you think you could get this done to where we could go early March? And he says, well, yeah, I probably could. And I mean, saving 2 months down the road, I think would have added a lot onto this. So I think it worked out well. He buckled down and got it done for us. And I think there's a lot of savings in that. So he's come up with a lot of stuff on this bridge project that's, I think, saving us a lot of money. So
Then hopefully, a lot of the engineering that's going in on the bridge will save us money on the construction. We have some estimates, but like Lance said, we just took a bunch of money. At one point, it was gonna be 14 feet high on this side of the bridge, and now it's only 6.
well, this afternoon, we had a meeting with Horrocks where we closed out all the conflict resolution comments that the city had to do with the bridge so they could submit it. There's one more I got to follow up with Clark when he gets back, but basically realigning this road solved all the concerns we had with the bridge and elevations and everything. By us moving this road, we solved all the issues we had. So
Good report.
Okay, any more discussion? Thank you, Lance. Rezone request, single family residential, R18 to multifamily, RM15. So Tony's volunteered.
Yeah, I got Lance here too, and Tony's here.
Yep.
Took me a while to kind of focus in on what they were talking about in the planning meeting on this right here. So let me speak, Lance, step in here, please. This is that new road. Going up into, I forget what this is called.
Mountain Vista Estates.
So this is this brand new road right here. There's this little piece of property right here. This piece right there is on RM15 already. So the owner is requesting a rezone of these two part, well, the road divides them. He wants to put these as RM15 as well. So immediately after the last zoning planning meeting, I got, that next day I got my car and took a little drive, because I should have done it before the planning meeting. This is like a detention basin right here, right now. There's no way anything's going to be built there, because it simply is. And over here, if you go up there, there's a gas line that goes right through the middle of one of those parcels. So this property over right here is requesting this zone change.
So it's actually us requesting.
Actually, the
See, that's
city.
right, it's the city requesting. Thank you. It is the city requesting the zone change. Because he, as I understand it, he could go ahead and do whatever, do what he wanted here on this little RM15 piece right now. He'd be free to do it because it's zoned out right now. but he wants the city of Wright.
How big is that, Tony? You know,
That,
in the 15 now? Oh, they had a good map.
5 acres.
Oh, that one is. Well, not the whole thing.
I thought it was the.
That little piece is.
Rezone would be 235.
The rezone, yeah, but
It's not very big.
the piece that he wants to put a fourplex is,
Yeah, that little piece right there, I'm not sure how big that is. He could put a fourplex on it, but it, you know, but the city's asked for the rezone, so that, so Ty, you'll have to help me out here on this one.
Okay.
The difference between the RM15 and the single family has to do with the buffer.
Well, yeah, so we have a landscaping requirement, a buffer zone that we have on both sides so that anybody, because it's up to another zone, it's not up to another use or it's not up to another property. But when you go from one zone to another, we have a requirement for additional landscaping as a buffer, which impacts all the way around that circle. And it's just an artificial thing, right? So like Tony said, it's not, because he's basically gonna have to buffer a detention pond. And this property up here, it's a little different now because that road comes through. That person's also in RM15, even though it's not being used as RM15, would have a landscaping requirement because they're next to a different zone. On this side, in their future development, they would also have a landscape buffer. So the city at some point removed this section of RM15 and put it here. Oops. Put it down here, which it wasn't required to do that, but now that there's development here, we just recognize that there's this landscaping requirement that doesn't really accomplish anything. And it protects nobody other than the next zone, right? So on one side, you're protecting the pipeline, or on one side, you're protecting the catch basin. And so when we were working with Wilf through this process of like, hey, what do we do with this landscaping requirement? He said it'd just be easier in this situation because of how many properties are buffering nobody. It'd be easier just to rezone it instead of deal with our landscaping requirement or try and do some process where we don't require a landscape requirement. So typically you have one zone and then you have another zone. It doesn't go a pocket of two different zones, which right now would be required on both sides. So you'd have landscaping to buffer from. And so that's all it was, is just, hey, let's just clean this up. We recognize that at some point the city took that zoning over there. Let's
We don't
just,
know why they did that.
just as it made people feel better, I think, about this for that. So we didn't have too much RM15, even though that RM15, right, that gap of RM15 is not even buildable. So it's probably like, sure, you can take it from there. I don't care. Just give me RM15 down here. I don't know. I wasn't here. So you can only
It sounded like
assume.
a swamp.
Yeah, exactly. So
And I like to be like, they're like, I'd like to be like that gas line almost.
Takes up
That piece in too.
well, and the other thing is it's huge elevation. So you buffer from up here, it means nothing to whoever develops down here or vice versa. You're down here and you're buffering. It's like, I don't care, even if there is a buffer, my house sits, if it was developable, right? And so, as that applicant just started, he came in and just started looking at, hey, what can I do on my property? We're like, well, you gotta,
Stegelmeyer.
you gotta put a
Oh.
landscape buffer up here instead of put, wherever the driveway landed up. And so it just got to be a little bit, what's the intent here? And
Tony, what were the citizen concerns?
There was maybe 3 or 4, Lance, 4 or 5, a handful of people there. And honestly, I think that initially, maybe some of them were a little opposed to, but I think as we brought the map over, we got talking about it and explained, I mean, helped me a great deal.
I don't think they understood.
I think by the end of the meeting, I think they walked out of here feeling
we
pretty good about it. I think.
Yeah,
to have a change, they're maybe expecting to coming into the meeting that we've got higher density.
Well, yeah,
But-
see,
In reality, there will be no higher density.
that's
No,
that's 0.3,
Not gonna
that's
build it.
0.37 acres. I looked it up. He can do what he's gonna do, whether we do this or not, but he's got 100 feet. I did the math during the planning commission meeting to try and explain and help everyone understand. He's got 100 feet of frontage and he's gonna build his townhomes backing the detention basin. Out of 100 feet with two 25-foot landscape buffers, he only had 50 feet left to work with for the fourplex and the parking and everything. And this picks him up 15 feet, which doesn't seem like a lot, but in 100 feet, he even mentioned, he says, with that extra room, I may not have to go so high to get the square footage I want. It's gonna change his design. And so I think it's gonna make a better, he can do it either way, but it makes a far better project.
Seems
so
like
at
there
the end,
was,
at the end of the meeting, I thought it made a lot of sense.
so there was a little bit of concern about maybe one or two landowners that were worried that it would affect what they may be able to do down the road.
See, these folks were here.
Yeah, right below.
they-
The green
I didn't
Valina.
see them having any issue with
Yeah,
that.
the only actual landowner is the Wall Brothers. Where it would go from RM8 to RM15, and they're currently building R18, even though it's in RM15. It just reduces that landscape buffer. And because no buildings happen on that upper side, we just recognized if it's this same issue for this guy down here, it's gonna happen all the way around that little circle. And unless,
Also, maybe you could do it now if he wants to. But if we was to change this though, I think he could do it where it would kind of look a little,
Yeah,
little.
to where it fits better and.
Yeah, it wouldn't
we're
be
all
so-
better off, including the neighbors.
Get a
15
little better
extra
design
feet,
out of it.
15 extra feet and 100 feet. That's a lot of,
So it was kind of a.
yeah. So
Yeah, if you want, we'll take a drive.
I
there.
drove
You
up
could-
through there,
you
yeah.
could- you could-
the other thing is I wasn't there, Wilf wasn't there, and Teresa wasn't there, so we kind of left the planning commission in a lurch as far as like what the intent was, because we were the applicant. And so
That's right.
it took them a while to
Use
figure
it
out
For a minute.
what was going on, but we all didn't connect the dots that any of us weren't gonna be there. And we were the ones, the three of us were the ones that initially decided, okay, let's just go ahead and ask to rezone it. We checked with Walls. They said that's no impact to them.
The property owner was there.
One down there, yeah,
uh,
yeah. But
Can I ask, is there a street up there that's owned by the city?
will be
So that,
Jenny Lane.
Jenny Lane.
is that street there? So there's a street up through the center of that?
Mhm.
This is different than this is showing. Now there's a.
Yeah, it's a different recorded. They recorded we just amended the plat and they're re-recording it. It's a little different design, but yeah,
So the road actually comes here.
on that,
And then there's a.
there's a HOA all the way down.
we own it. What you're seeing up there was approved like in 2006. And when they came up with this plat and said, here's what we want to do, we approached them about, they were running their main road through and gonna tee it with a private narrow lane. And they had a cul-de-sac coming off it was gonna be awful for traffic flow. So we approached them and this is all changed now and made it a better deal for everybody. I actually think that should be recorded any day now. So
Yeah, we've been working,
after months and
it's taking us
months.
longer to record.
After last night, back to our landscaping, is that a good policy we have? Do we need to revisit that?
No, that's what we talked about, but typically it is if you're transitioning from one zone to another. That's
So,
the whole
okay, it's
purpose
still-
of it, because it's,
Fits right and feels right everywhere else.
yeah.
Okay,
Typically.
Right. So we dealt with this a little bit between, like over here on Blaine's property next to the school.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
There was a big landscaping requirement because there were two different zones, but when we looked at it, we're like, well, it's the school was in a residential zone next to commercial, so then there was this 40-foot landscape buffer, even though right now they share a fence and it would have literally zero impact. And so what happened there is we rezoned the whole school property because it didn't change any uses. It was just this artificial between zones, but sometimes if there is a whole section of zone next to another section of zone, then the whole purpose of that landscaping requirement is, not to have a negative impact on a different zone. That's all it is. It's not properties. So maybe that's something we address later, but
I think it's,
as it plays out there, the reality is when you do zoning, you shouldn't have these little pockets. So
Yeah, that island there just doesn't
that's
make
kind of
sense.
that's kind of the weird thing, right? Because
Yeah,
now it's like,
Yet there was no explanation for it.
No,
Somebody's.
I don't know
thought
why,
through it.
I don't know whether there wasn't anything, any staff notes on this in our packet, but it came to us unanimously from the.
Yeah, I think Will, didn't he sign off saying it made sense?
that was the only staff notes, but because we weren't there at the meeting and we didn't point to, here's why we're asking and go through the whole scenario, it took them a little while to arrive at the,
Need to apologize to the planning commission.
no, I don't. He gets,
Well, I'm just
There.
glad.
I
over
work for the council, I don't work for the planning commission.
I'm just glad over the years I'd picked up on enough of what was going on with that and how it had happened that finally I could explain it to him, and I knew enough about it to explain it, and that, so it worked out. It was okay.
Hopefully that was a fairly decent explanation. but-
Yeah, no, that works. Gary, did you have any questions on?
No, just a note in the back of the file, and that would be that we need to change the ordinance to allow for a variation of that planning or the landscape requirements when it doesn't quite fit. In this type of area, rather than changing the zone every time to try and make the landscaping requirements make sense, we could actually just put a provision there that says that we can vary the landscape requirements if, in the opinion of the planning commission, that there's no,
When this was,
there's no need. for
when this
that.
happened originally, that could have taken place and then we wouldn't have the discussion tonight.
It would have been
And,
easier.
or if the state hasn't already preempted landscaping requirements,
What landscaping, right?
Yeah.
with some rocks on the ground.
Changing it every week.
But we did work through that with the planner. and Wilf just said it. In this case, it's probably just easier to
Oh, yeah, in this case.
request a zone change because it probably should all be one zone.
So, Gary, we have a public hearing tonight again for the same thing, but this may be the last time we do it this way. Don't we have a change coming on board?
Yes.
To just have just the single public
Just
hearing.
single
Public hearing.
And the second one would be a meeting, and Denise just ran that by me. So we're good.
Yeah.
Yeah, it'll change it to comport with state law.
Right.
It'll be a good
Yeah, I do
thing.
too. We,
Rehashing the same things and then having
Yeah.
new issues. brought up.
right.
Who was that gentleman that was with Will last night? What was his name?
Craig.
Craig.
Great call.
It was a good meeting.
Yeah.
Full of power.
Good training.
I'm gonna have to tease him about that. Craig and Wilf are the two experts in the state on land use.
Took a little bit to get up to speed, though, to appreciate his sense of humor.
You had to listen pretty close. You had to pay attention.
It's very dry. The first 15 minutes, I don't think the audience was catching on, but
Like, did you just say that? Am I here?
yeah, after a while, it
Wait a minute.
it helped out.
Well, I really appreciate you being there. That is really neat.
I think we were all there, weren't we?
We had all
Entire
of us.
council and the
Those
mayor.
Really good examples of what they were talking about. That was helpful too. With the case studies, that was really good.
That's what Craig's really good at, is the actual on the ground
Yeah.
examples of what's going on.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but we gotta move along.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Good job.
Introduction, Ty, of Jake Young.
So I was just gonna let everybody know, most of you met Jake, but he's our new planner. Taking Wilf's spot. Wilf's now on the tour, like you saw last night. He's high demand training services, but met with him. He's gonna be a really good next step for us. I think he does a lot of ordinance work. So where we have the new general plan and adoption, his passion is projects and ordinance updates. He's done quite a bit of form-based code, which I'm excited about. It's less worried about the actual text and more of the design elements that we're looking for. This is what we want to look like when we grow up, and then some flexibility options to work with people on their development. And I don't understand the whole thing. I just know hearing back from other cities that have gone to form-based, they're pretty excited about that. So it's working out well for them, but
Question to Gary, you had a nice reference for Will. Do you know Jake at all?
I don't.
Okay. And how do we come by Jake?
through Wilf.
Okay.
So I did, there are a couple other planners that are out there, but Jake's proposal was, I like because of the project side of it. So he'll come to the meetings, he'll still do all of the, the normal planning stuff, our reviews, but he's actually quitting his current job to do consulting full-time. And so it's a consulting company that he's growing. And so we're one of his first
Where does he live?
new clients. He lives in Farmington.
So not too far away.
He made a point of coming around and shaking all
Yeah,
over.
he come.
Yeah.
Yesterday, I'm like, I'm not gonna be there. If you wouldn't mind just introducing yourself
He did.
as the new planner. So he succeeded on task one. I felt bad, like,
Not having, right?
and then I told him, since he came last night, don't worry about coming to tonight's meeting. I just update the council and let them know.
Gary Wilf was short-lived. Is that a surprise?
No.
Yeah.
No, I knew he was retired, and I knew we had him for a short amount of time. We worked really hard this session to get some funding for land use training. We're gonna do some Pace University types land use planning centers around the state. There'll be about 19 of them that we put on. And there'll be meetings with all the stakeholders, with Rocky Mountain Power, with the gas company, with UTA, with UDOT, and then with local leaders from the particular area. So that's what he's going to be very involved with. They gave us about $250,000 to do that, so.
Okay, well, Gary, I hate to cut you short like we always do on training, but
No, you're good. This
Let's,
is an important night to get.
let's close this meeting. I was gonna ask one technical question. Can we just stay where we're at? Or do you have to move up to the?
I want to move up for the public hearing so that people.
better?
I'd like to get on to it.
Later, are we gonna go into closed session tonight as well?
No, I've got that coming up.
I'm sorry, I should have said no.
We don't need to.
I got told no.
Okay, all right, okay. So just-
That's hard.